The curiosity is that I lived as an actor for many years, for decades, with a severe handicap, which was a fear of actually experiencing strong emotions. So I learned, which is a great British acting skill, to fake it and to make it look authentic. Murderous rage, fury, even happiness. All these things I learned to fake as an actor until one experience in one of Shakespeare's plays, The Winter's Tale, and the director, the late Ronald Eyre, said to me, "This play can only work if we believe that you are such a person. Therefore, I'm telling you that Leontes and all of his horrible impulses lives inside you. And what you must do is show them to us. All of those dark and ugly secrets that we all possess must be on display, has to be exposed. And if you take that risk," Ron Lair said, he was also a psychologist and I felt safe with him, he assured me that he would hold my hand and stand at my side, metaphorically, and see that I didn't fall. And I didn't. After that experience, I realized I couldn't fake it anymore. That what I was asked to bring to my acting work had to be authentic, the real thing. And if I could not find these emotions and feelings inside me, then I would have to find some imaginatively creative way of simulating those feelings, but not, believe me, faking it for a moment. This had happened shortly before the bizarre incident of Star Trek: The Next Generation. I had been, from time to time, visiting the United States, California in particular, holding master classes and workshops, primarily on Shakespeare and Shakespearean performance and acting. And one night, a friend of mine, a professor of English at UCLA, had asked me to illustrate a public lecture he was giving. I think it was called The Changing Face of Comedy in Dramatic Literature. And an actress friend of his and myself, we were to read extracts. And signed up for this course of public lectures was a man called Robert Justman, who had been one of the original producers of what I think is now known as classic Trek, i.e. Captain Kirk, Mr. Spock, and so forth. And at some point during this scholarly evening, he turned to his wife and said, "We have found the captain." The next... I mean, if there were more living proof or a better example of the whole thing about my profession being a lottery and a gamble, that was it. Because the next day, I was summoned to Gene Roddenberry's house to meet Big Bird, as he was known, to talk to him about the new series of Star Trek: The Next Generation. And as a result of that meeting, my life was about to change, to be utterly transformed. Not at once, because Gene Roddenberry thought I was massively unsuitable to be in his revival of Star Trek: The Next Generation. Nevertheless, I had a champion in Robert Justman and eventually a champion in the man who was to become executive producer, Rick Berman. And they continued to mention my name. So much so that I'm told at Paramount a memo went round the studio saying that the name of Patrick Stewart must not be raised again ever in connection with Star Trek: The Next Generation. Well, it was, and I was cast. Or rather, I was offered the role of the captain of the Enterprise. Now, you must understand, if you had not been to the Royal Shakespeare Company or watched the occasional classic BBC series, you would have never heard of Patrick Stewart, the actor. Some weeks before I was actually offered the role in the series, I had been working at the Young Vic in London, a theatre that I'm returning to in a couple of months' time, I'm delighted to say, in a production of Edward Albee's masterpiece, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. And the show was very successful, and we were transferring to the West End. But the leading actress didn't want to go. There were only 4 of us in the production. So there was a meeting taking place with the producers, and myself and the other 2 actors, Matthew Marsh and Saskia Reeves, as to who should play the role of Martha. And the producer at one point looked at us sitting around the table and said, well, I don't care who you cast as Martha, but it must be somebody that someone has heard of. That was a harsh judgment on my career, which at that point had been for over 28 years. I went to Los Angeles and was offered the job. The next day I met with my agent, who said, we need to go over the details of the offer. And at some point during this extraordinary encounter, when numbers and figures were put out into the air that were simply impossible to believe, that he said to me, and of course, 6 years. And I said, I beg your pardon? He said, well, 6 years. Everybody who signs on for a drama series in the United States, in Hollywood, they sign a 6-year contract. And I said, that's impossible. I have too many things to do. I can't commit myself to 6 years of living here. He said, look, the fact is you have nothing to worry about, because I have to tell you this, the series will be a failure. I said, what do you mean? He said, look, everybody in Hollywood knows you cannot revive an iconic series. Everyone thinks it's a crazy idea. It's not going to work. In fact, it's very possible you may not make it through the first season. And on that basis, and conversations I had with a few people that I knew in Hollywood, who all said the same thing. Oh, don't worry about 6 years. Absolutely, not a question. You should come over here, make a bit of money for the first time in your life, get a suntan, meet some girls, and go home. So I signed the contract. 7 years later, 2 o'clock in the morning, I stood on the set at Paramount Pictures and filmed the last scene of the final episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation, 178 hours of television. And my life was transformed. Not a corner of it remained untouched by this experience. It might have been calamitous, as it has been for other actors, to become so identified with a series and a role. And at times it has been. Once, while campaigning for a film role, a very important film role in a very important film, I finally got in to meet the director, and he said to me, after 15 minutes of desultory conversation, look, I have to be frank with you, why would I want Jean-Luc Picard in my movie? And that hurt, but I could understand where he was coming from. However, it transformed other aspects of my life in a very positive way, in that it made me, so far as the theatre was concerned, suddenly bankable. That is, I could open plays, whether in New York or Los Angeles or London or Washington or wherever. And ironically, having been so afraid of exposing myself to so much television, it opened a multitude of doors, including a return to the Royal Shakespeare Company, no longer as a, jobbing, supporting actor, but as a leading member of the company, simply because my presence put bums on seats, and really little else other than that. So I have to be grateful for those 7 years, in that they have transported me to this place where for the last 7 years I have been able to play great role after great role after great role, and enjoy myself more as an actor than I have at any time in the 50-odd years of a career. It was curious to me that kind of commercial success should have its major benefit back in the classical theatre in England, which is where I have spent the last 6 or 7 years since I returned from 17 years of life in California. What were the benefits of that? That I had been exposed to the public in a way that had been entirely unknown to me before, in a very visible way. It made me feel that I had really for the first time, that I had a voice as an artist, as an actor. I'd made the breakthrough before about being able to expose myself in terms of the inner workings of the life of an actor, but now I could communicate who I was by my choice of role, by the places that I chose to work in. I could feel like an artist for the first time in my life, and not just somebody who was making a living. And this was the direct result of all of those years and all of those 178 episodes and 4 feature films of Star Trek: The Next Generation. So when people ask me, how does it compare, that experience, those 7 years, with the 7 years that I've just spent, I have to say with all honesty that if it were all to end tonight, and that largely what I would be remembered for would be sitting in a large chair saying, engage, or make it so, that would be fine by me, because I'm proud of the work that we did. I'm proud of the issues and subjects that we tackled. Some of them, for an American television series at that time, quite bold, and that moment by moment, and I think you can check this, we got the grammar right of everything that we said. That is, we spoke largely very good English, for the primary reason that Jonathan Frakes, who played Commander Riker in the series, his father was an English teacher, and he had warned us that if ever we got any grammar wrong, his father would be on the phone to him complaining about it.